Yes, good morning. Welcome back to the best On Ground Weekday Kickoff. It's Wednesday, the 16th of September 2020. My name's Pete Fairbairn. I'm your host. And joining me today, Darren Parkin down in Melbourne. How are you, Dash?
Going all right. We creep closer to the end of lockdown, but the weather's actually warming up. I think we're headed for 25 on the weekend, so will make us crave outside a bit more.
Yeah, well, a little bit of extra time outside and hopefully a lot more very soon for our friends in Victoria. The premise of the show, very simple. We're going to look at 5 big stories making waves in the world of sport. This morning we've gotten up early and scoured the papers to find the big topics to talk to you about. We're going to start over in Adelaide in the Advertiser with an article from Simeon Thomas Wilson, and it looks at the Adelaide Crows, a number of players taking to social media to lash out after Adelaide's Lachlan Sholl missed out on a Rising Star nomination. He was best on ground against Carlton if you go by the News Corp and 9 newspaper judges. Instead, that Rising Star nomination went to Collingwood defender Isaac Quaynor, who gathered 17 disposals in a good performance against Gold Coast on Monday. There's no doubting Sholl had a massive game against Carlton. 24 disposals, 2 goals, 3 clearances, 8 score involvements, and nearly double the metres gained by Quaynor, I should say. Even Trent Rivers from Melbourne had pretty similar numbers possession-wise to Quaynor, but kicked a couple of clutch goals in their win against GWS. Taylor Walker, Tom Doedee, Brodie Smith, they're some of the guys who've taken to social media to lash out at the decision. I'm going to look at Brodie Smith. He said, "I really rate Isaac Quaynor. No doubt he's going to be a star, but my man was best on ground. What is going on here?" Taylor Walker said he's absolutely flabbergasted. "Can someone please explain to me why Lachlan Sholl missed out on something today?" Tom Doedee said, "Hang on, hold up, wait a second. There's something wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't say Lachlan Sholl," when he quote tweeted the AFL's announcement. I can understand that Sholl should have been in that conversation, but putting that aside for a second, Darren, do you think it's okay for these Adelaide Crows players to post these messages online, or is it a show of poor sportsmanship?
Yeah, and I think for something like that, it's okay. It's sort of putting their arms around the boy. And the Rising Star nomination process has always been a little bit murky, particularly at the end of the season. It's almost as if they have a list of players that they feel have just missed out in previous weeks. So take Quaynor, for example. They might look at it and think, oh, he's played 3 games where he was close. He deserves a nomination, so we'll find him one in the back end of the year. I mean, you wouldn't get one if he played poorly, but it's almost the case that it's based on a cumulative form rather than one game. Now, Lachie Sholl was clearly the best young player in the competition over the weekend. You mentioned Rivers' contribution too, but it almost felt like we had to get Quaynor a nomination. It wouldn't sit right with us if he didn't get one over the course of the season. We've seen that a bit with players in the back end where they think, oh, we've only got 2 or 3 more opportunities to award one of these. We definitely need to get one his way. I mean, if you line the 2 games up, Sholl's had a better game, but they never directly tell us that it's based on an accumulation of form, but it clearly is. And yeah, that they felt that they owed Quaynor one and they've given him one. And it wouldn't surprise me if Sholl has a 14 or 15 possession solid contribution against Richmond, if maybe he gets his gong on the back of perhaps a game that wasn't quite at the level of the one the week before. But yeah, unfortunately, that's been the Rising Star 101, which I can understand that there are some players you think it'd be stiff if he didn't get a nomination. But if you're going to tell us it's the best young kid of the weekend, you'd want it to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting call you make, and perhaps even more so when you look at the fact that Lachlan Sholl, he's played 7 AFL matches, so he would be eligible for the Rising Star next year as well. Trent Rivers, if the D's weren't to play finals, comes into that conversation as someone who comes in at the 10 games or less threshold to be eligible again in 2021. So you wonder if they are looking at a bigger picture there. For what it's worth, for mine, I don't think it's a great look. A footy club who have had a really, really poor year. Yes, they've won a few on the bounce, and that's fantastic. I think everyone in footy's happy to see that. But I just think it's not really fair on Isaac Quaynor. The players should be a united group to a degree, and it puts unnecessary pressure on him. And I just don't think it's a great example of sportsmanship for what it's worth. And that comes despite the fact that I am very much an advocate for players having strong online profiles and voicing their opinions. This one rubbed me up a little bit the wrong way. We're going to move to a different competition now. We're going to move to the NRL, and story from Gilbert Gardner in the Herald Sun looking at the Josh Addo-Carr transfer out of the Melbourne Storm at the end of the year. course, the representative winger who's been a superstar for that football club for a number of years. It was kind of announced in pre-season that he did want to move back to Sydney at the end of 2020, despite being contracted to 2021 for family reasons. The Storm said at the time, provided we can get somebody of a similar value in return, same position, that we're open to that conversation. We want to do the right thing by our premiership-winning winger. That being said, there's not many wingers or outside backs in the competition of the same calibre as Addo-Carr, so it hasn't been a case of an easy deal to be struck with any clubs. And the West Tigers are the club that Addo-Carr has been most strongly linked with. Storm Chief Executive Dave Donaghy had to come out yesterday and essentially say, reassert the club's stance and say that they wouldn't budge from their demand to get a like-for-like replacement. And also that if they couldn't come to some sort of agreement in the next few days, they're going to park it until the end of finals. We love Josh. He's been a great contributor to the club. We understand his family's circumstances, but we're mindful that we built a team with him contracted until the end of 2021. We feel our requirement to get a player back for granting his early release is fair and reasonable. We've spoken to the club he wants to go to and inquired about a couple of players, and they've fobbed us off. It's their prerogative, but it's not helpful in trying to achieve an outcome for Josh. We understand his desire to get back to Sydney and the reasons for that. We're working with his management to try and secure an outcome that's mutually beneficial, but we have been really clear and consistent from day one. If we can facilitate an outcome where we're no worse off, then we'll happily provide a release. Until that point, he's contracted with us until 2021. Now, of course, in the NRL competition, we don't see a trade period like we do in the AFL. Traditionally, players who leave clubs when they're contracted are either players who've been kicked out or players who've kicked up such a stink, like Ryan Madison last year, leaving the West Tigers, that no one really wants them around anymore. That's not what's happened here. And for mine, I think the Melbourne Storm taking a fairly reasonable stance in this situation. More broadly, do you think that this indicates that the NRL is going to start heading more in the direction of a trade-type system like we do see in the AFL, Darren?
Potentially. I guess from an AFL perspective, we've always found it different or strange that often a player will, be it, homesickness with Hoffman and guys like that in the past, where they've said almost in the middle of the season, I'm going here or I'm going there, and coming to terms with the fact that that one of your players is going to play somewhere else the following season, and just allowing that to continue as normal. Obviously, in an AFL environment, that's a completely foreign concept, and maybe the NRL is moving back that other way. And I can understand the Storm stance. I mean, they're a premiership contender, so you want to make sure that the replacement is a now replacement, not a future replacement or a development replacement. It's someone that keeps you firmly in the window at the time that you are in the window. And obviously the Storm probably face those challenges more than a lot of clubs, given they're not in an NRL traditional environment. So there's not going to be a heck of a lot of homegrown talent. So they're prone to the homesickness factor probably more than most. So I can understand that the stance of everybody. I can understand that the Tigers saying, well, he wants to come here. I can understand that the Storm saying, well, we're in the window. And I can understand Josh saying, well, I want to go home. But everybody's got to stand up for the position that they are in that situation. But yeah, maybe it's going to be maybe a moulding of those forces, what we're used to seeing in the AFL, where those things are kept under wraps until the end of the season. As opposed to what we've seen generally in the NRL, where it's been quite transparent, where it's been, well, I'm going here, this is when I'm doing it, I'll play out the rest of the season with your best wishes, and on we go. But I can understand the position of everybody involved.
Yeah, also worth noting, of course, Melbourne Storm will lose their other winger, Suliasi Vunivalu, at the end of the season. He's heading to the Queensland Reds and Australian Rugby Union. And also, I think, Addo-Carr, he's also in the market now as somebody who wants to play fullback. We know that won't happen at the Storm, and we know that fullbacks generally get larger contracts than wingers, and he is being shopped around as a fullback as well. So now that's not to say his reasons for wanting to go home aren't genuine and aren't family-based, but I think it's very, very reasonable for Dave Donaghy and the Storm organisation to stand their ground a little bit and say, we've already agreed to something we didn't have to agree to, but it is on these terms. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Our third story this morning comes from friend of the show, Vince Rugari, in the Sydney Morning Herald. He's looking at whether the A-League second division will be created, and that's come off the back of 30 clubs naming themselves on Tuesday as having raised more than $100,000 in funding that will go towards modelling for a second division called the Championship, aimed at one day connecting with the A-League through promotion and relegation. Vince Rigari has spoken with Football Federation Australia Chief Executive James Johnson, who says it's no longer a case of if, but when that second tier will begin. But Johnson's also reminded aspiring clubs that the ultimate power does rest with that governing body. Among the NPL clubs to have contributed to the fund are more than a dozen former National Soccer League clubs, including the likes of the Melbourne Knights, South Melbourne, Sydney United, Sydney Olympic. There's also FFA Cup specialist Bentley Greens, a reborn Gold Coast United, and every state and territory bar the Northern Territory is represented in this group of 30 clubs. The thing that caught my eye the most here, Darren, the proposed tagline for the championship is "Football as we know it." The A-League's inaugural marketing slogan was "It's football, but not as you know it." So just a subtle dig and a twist of the knife there. In general, we know the game is in disarray at a professional level. We've got the PFA and the clubs struggling to come to terms with a new collective bargaining agreement that's reflective of a reduced broadcast deal, which is due to expire in 12 months' time, and big question marks over whether Fox Sports will look to extend that. We've got a number of players in the A-League competition. Star players have chosen not to return under what's going to be a reduced salary cap. Stephen Taylor from the Wellington Phoenix and Gary Hooper, the latest two to announce they won't be coming back. There's a lot of infighting in this game in general. And while this could have been an exciting and positive announcement, I can't help but think that the tagline and the kind of angle in which these clubs have gone about it is just another example of division amongst Australian football stakeholders. Do you think that will prevent the game from being able to develop and being able to be strong at a professional level?
I think so. I mean, it's always been the case. I mean, the TV ratings have been clearly very ordinary. I mean, they came out of the COVID situation and finished their season and got a worthy premiere and all of that sort of stuff. But you compare, say, 5 or 6 years ago where the NBL was and where the A-League was and how those two competitions have flipped in terms of the public spotlight, TV ratings, expansion, all of that sort of stuff. Obviously, they wanted a point of difference in the A-League by having a final series, which isn't the case in a lot of global football competitions where it's first past the post. In all of the European competitions and the South American competitions, we wanted a grand final and a preliminary final and all of that sort of stuff because perhaps Australian football fans are used to that type of thing with other competitions. And the promotion relegation is not something that you see in a lot of sports in Australia, but it is something synonymous with football. And given the A-League's battle for expansion in recent years, the notion of promotion relegation seems the best way to do that rather than sort of building a club from scratch, plonking it in a market and trying to do it that way. You earn your opportunity through a feeder competition to get yourself in there. It keeps interest in the latter end of the season when teams are struggling or you've got a Mariners or whoever it may be at the bottom of the table fighting for their survival, not just playing out time. What does it mean for Wellington Phoenix if you end up in a situation like that? Would they play in a feeder competition? We know their future's been up in the air. So, yeah, it's probably just confirmation that the A-League have struggled for a specific and definitive identity. But I would think that a promotion relegation system is closer to what football is supposed to look like.
Yeah, look, and I think there's some exciting elements to it too, right? There's some famous Australian football club names there, and to your point of keeping the season relevant right until the very end, no matter where you are on the table, I think that's a critical component that's missing in the A-League at the moment. Just want everyone to get on the same page. I mean, how low does the sport have to fall at a professional level in this country for everyone to sit around and smoke the peace pipe? We've seen in Australian rugby, it took a global pandemic to probably get everybody on the same page, and that hasn't been enough so far for football in this country, but hopefully we see some indications of that soon. Staying with football, our penultimate story today, and 3 massive stories coming out of the English Premier League this morning. One that'll make you very happy as an Aston Villa fan is Jack Grealish signing a new 5-year contract, club captain, recent England debutant. Fantastic news there. And Arsenal fans will be up and about with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang signing a new 3-year contract with them. But the one that's really caught my eye is this story, and it looks like there's a genuine likelihood that Real Madrid misfit Gareth Bale will be returning to Tottenham Hotspur. Of course, He left Spurs in 2013 to join Madrid for a then world record fee of £85 million, if you don't mind. Went on to score more than 100 goals and win 4 Champions League titles for Real Madrid, but he's been very much sliding out of the equation under Zinedine Zidane at the Bernabeu. Barely featured when the season resumed after COVID. He is on that £600,000 a week contract, which makes it really, really tough to find a club who could cover those wages. But this morning we have seen some quotes from his agent saying Gareth still loves Spurs. We are talking, as in Spurs, Real and Bale's camp. It's where he wants to be. We know Spurs aren't going to pay that full contract, but maybe, just maybe, we'll see a loan type agreement where Bale does return home, or possibly he returns home and in lieu of a transfer fee, Spurs make a big financial commitment over a number of years for what they might pay him from a wage perspective. How exciting would it be to have Gareth Bale back in the Premier League? And does this fit into the category of favourite son returns home, or is this more so you should never go back?
I think it's as close as you can get in football. We don't often see that when, the amount of movements and those sorts of things around the land. But no, I wouldn't say she'd never go back. 31 years of age, a favourite son of that club. Tottenham have been around the frame for a few years, sort of finishing sort of second, third, fourth, fifth in the Premier League. Whether it's something that bridges the gap for them immediately, or whether he's at that level where he can contribute to the degree that they want to obviously compete with the Manchester Cities and Liverpools of the world at the top. But no, I think this is something that'll be pretty well received. It doesn't ring too many alarm bells. Obviously, the price tag is hefty, but they can probably get around that to some degree. I think it's a really good story to have him back in the comp. He's obviously left for the desired result to get that success, and obviously the price tag. Now he returns home. It's good that he never sort of lost that love or loyalty for the club, and will return home. And the Grealish one, as you say, I mean, there's always been talk that he'd go to a bigger club. But in saying that, obviously to get a 5-year commitment at Aston Villa, where he's always loved the club. He's loved the club since he was a boy. So, fantastic story.
Absolutely. Villa fans up and about. Our final story today, and we'll have to be pretty quick on this one, but it comes from the Australian Financial Reviewer, Michael Bleby, who's been speaking with Australian Olympic Committee President John Coates about the proposed cost of hosting the 2032 Summer Olympics in southeast Queensland. Coates has said that Queensland's $4.5 billion bid would be self-sustaining. However, there's been a report that's come out overnight from Oxford University, I think off the top of my head, that says that the average cost of hosting the 5 recent Olympic tournaments has been 16.4 billion Australian dollars. Pretty big disparity between those two numbers. Does it call into account some concerns regarding the financial status of this bid, or do you think that ultimately this bid for the 2032 Olympic Games is about more than money anyway, Darren?
Yeah, I think it's about more than money, but it's also about, I guess, the country's ability to deal with it. I mean, we saw it left Athens in Greece effectively in ruins. Brazil obviously struggled in the aftermath of it. Beijing obviously had its impact as well in that regard. So it's how does the country deal with it after the Olympics? Do you have excess stadiums? Is the infrastructure serve a purpose to the economy long run? And I think we've seen Queensland, I know the Com Games is different. We've seen Australia host the Olympics twice before and have handled it quite well. I think you mentioned before that the Sydney Olympics cost about $500 per household in terms of taxpayer dollars. But what does it bring in terms of tourism and the economy and that sort of stuff? So, no, I think Queensland and by extension Australia is well placed to avoid the stadiums left dormant and, rail lines that aren't getting used and all of that sort of stuff. I think if it can fit into the bigger picture of the economy, then it's absolutely well worth the ride. And Queensland have been very, very bold in their quest for sporting events over recent times. And I think they could avoid the blowout, but also avoid the residual downturn that comes from hosting an Olympics that we've seen in countries in the past.
Interestingly, one of the things that really stood out to me in the report was it said that bids should be handled quicker and that there would be less money spent if there was a smaller amount of time to prepare. I mean, we're talking 12 years until those games, but I dare say the people involved in the organisation now would be saying if we can have everything locked in and set away and we can build on our own timeline, that's actually going to be more cost effective. We'll continue to watch that space with interest as well. Darren Parkin, thank you so much for joining the best on ground weekday kickoff. Great to have you back on the show.
No worries, anytime.
And we look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Bye.